As I said, Dr. Ann Hobbs is our speaker today, and she is the director of the Juvenile Justice Institute at UNO. And she's on several local boards. And what I am always intrigued of is your travel.
Oh,
Many different areas of the world, and have shared your expertise in those areas to make those better places. So the floor is yours, and welcome.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, I'll talk a little bit about travel, but I want to kind of go back and plant the seed of how we become who we are, right? So sometimes I think people think if you have a lot of accomplishments, you just woke up one day, or you are self-driven. And some of that is true, but some of it is, I think you inherit some things. I think where you're born has to do with it. So I thought I'd start as where I was born. So I was born and raised in Alaska. And both my grandparents had, before we got to Alaska, both of my sets of grandparents on both sides had their own businesses. And I think that's important because it drives who we are. It sets our concepts from a very early age, right? So you're going to find today when I'm talking, it's going to sound like a crazy roller coaster ride. And it is, like it really is. But I think it's really about saying yes to opportunities that fit in with your spirit, right? Who you are. And I think too many people are they're very cautious, and we don't allow ourselves to say yes. So that's why I think this space intrigues me, because I'm like, all these people said yes, right? Like, so back to Alaska. My parents moved up there. They were actually on their way to California, and they hit a wild horse in Wyoming. And for the longest time, I was like I was thinking hobby horse. Like I remember as a kid thinking, what is wrong with you people? Like, you hit a horse? They did. They hit a wild horse, and then ended up, instead of landing in California, they landed in Alaska. Well, it wasn't a state yet. So that is like an important part of our story, is when you go to a place that's not a state, you really have to be creative. And so there weren't a lot of businesses. And so they started, my dad was a window painter. Like he would paint Christmas decorations on windows just to kind of make things work, right? So that's where kind of our family story really kind of starts, and I think gets really creative, is in Alaska. So I was born only 8 years after Alaska became a state. And this is what our downtown looked like. It's really not a lot there, right? So growing up there, that kind of sense of anything's possible. A lot of people came to Alaska with kind of, how do I say it? A checkered past. Like people came to start a clean slate. And so there's a kind of a broader acceptance, I would say, of people, and just an acceptance of people, that people make mistakes, can recover, can start over, can still be super creative, awesome human beings. And so there's a really different spirit, I think, to Alaska. And absolutely, yeah. And so, and then the other thing is just super diverse. I think it's still the same. It's been about 30 years since I lived there, but no, maybe 40 years. It's been a while, 30 years. But really diverse groups of people have come together there. So it kind of creates a neat place to grow up, because it kind of sets your soul for anything is possible. And sometimes I think just like to the midnight sun, like this kind of extremes, because people will be like, why are you this way? And I'll be like, well, I think it's because, the endless sunlight and then the darkness, like some of those things I think play into who you are, besides just your family. So I just wanted to set the stage, because you're going to hear kind of a wild story, I think. My parents, they had really steady jobs in Chicago and left them. I think this just pulled to do something creative and different. So they started, my dad was painting windows and store windows for Christmas. And then they ended up buying this little hut, which was a restaurant. And then as kids, we grew up really thinking about owning our own places. And so we all grew up, like I think I started working in the restaurant when I was about probably 10, like doing various cleaning things. And then we moved up to cooking. Then I was banned from the kitchen. That's a whole nother story. That was bad. And then, waitressing, and I eventually progressed to being like the banquet manager. So really set the stage of kind of who we were. But we did that in a very team environment with all of our siblings. And
lived there then, Anne, where the restaurant was, or you lived there and then you made it into a restaurant, or?
No, we actually, it was totally separate from our house, which I think was a blessing because of having kind of that boundary. Anybody who works, I guess maybe the restaurant people aren't here, but restaurants can be all consuming, right? I mean, whenever you own your own business, it can be all consuming because you wake up and you think, oh, I could do this and I could make it better, right? So it was really good, I think, to have that boundary and not live in the same location of the restaurant. Yeah. But that building was actually really famous because you can't tell from the picture. It was the only one I could find, but it was bright, bright blue, like think royal blue, but fluorescent royal blue. And so all the pilots that would fly over, it was close to the airport, the pilots would be like, we always know our landmark. So so it was really, it's still there from what I understand, but they've painted it brown and they're trying to fit in, like, right, it's trying to become more normal. But even now, the building itself was, it was barracks in the Second World War. And so it's a Quonset hut, like it's metal inside. So another just kind of weird part of our story is because it was metal inside, it would freeze in the winter. So we had to shut. Like the restaurant closed in October, usually the second week of October. It didn't open again until March. So that really meant like a lot of quality time, but also creative. Like you have to have an income during that time. So yes, window painting, but also then construction. So really this kind of sense of having your own business and doing your own thing really was deeply instilled. So when I got to the age of going off to college, I was really resistant to it because I was like, no, I want to stay. I want to run the bar. And my dad was like, no, just go. And, I want you to go see something else, test your brain out in the real world. And then if you want to come back, you can come back. So I was, my mom had gone to college, but I was the first woman in my family to go to a university. And so I went to the University of San Francisco, and it was pretty, kind of pretty normal education. And then I came back to Alaska because I was like, I want to come back, right? All my friends had either settled or I got on to graduate school, and I was like, I want to come back to Alaska. So I came back and started really managing the restaurant and thinking, I'm going to own this, and this is the life I want. And my dad was really resistant to this idea, though. So I'm glad that I came back because I met my spouse there. He showed up one day when it was I was a bartender at that time, and he showed up and I said, I can't talk right now. I've got 1 million people at the bar. And I didn't know, I think this is the secret to saying yes to things. Like, I didn't know the circumstances that he was in, and he had just finished bartending school in Florida and couldn't find a job. So he came running over, right? And I was like, what are you doing here? I said, I'm busy. And he's like, I'm a bartender. And I was like, you're hired. Like, it was just like that, And so I think really I even now at my age, I feel so strongly about saying yes when it's not unsafe, or if there's no reason to not say yes, you should say yes, because the most wonderful things happen when you open those doors. So I think you'll hear that in just a minute. And my watch broke this morning, so it's like, oh my gosh, stop talking. You can tell me that. So I came back and started running the restaurant, and really was like, I just want to own this business. And my dad was like, you're smart. You need to just go do something else. So he kept putting it off, go do something else. And I think it's because he knew the hardship of running your own business, right? The uncertainties, the things that are scary, the market, COVID, all these things that can. So I think he wanted really something more stable for me. But, you can put me in a stable environment and I can mess that up. So I should say, make it interesting. So that's how I landed in Nebraska, actually, is I came, when he was like, go find something, I was like, what's the fastest degree you can get? And all the lawyers are going to hate me, but a law degree is the fastest. You can do it in 2.5 years if you want. So, but this is really where my life started to get super interesting, because before I applied to law school, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go whip this out and I'll come back and run this restaurant. Yeah, exactly. Right. That's the mindset. So, but in the meantime, I got married and got pregnant with my first child, Savannah, who is on the call today. And so I was like, what do you do with law school? And so I was like, okay, I'll postpone it for a year. I feel like my whole story is me trying to just be like, I'm going to do this the way normal people do things, right? So I was like, I'm going to postpone it, and it'll just be a little bit rougher because I'll have a 9-month-old. So that's exactly what I did. We moved down here. I think Savannah was about 6 months old actually, and started law school. And, just ready for the traditional path. Only the first week of law school, I found out I was pregnant with my second child. So I told my husband, I'm like, we got to move back, right? Like, this is my excuse. We're now running the business. And he's like, oh, heck no. He had driven, it's called the Alaska-Canadian Highway, like twice, I think, that summer. Maybe it's up and back, up and back. So he had moved our entire lives down here with a baby and a dog. And he was like, no, you're gonna have to stay here for a little while. So I'm just like, okay, I'm committed. I went through the first year of law school, and at the end of the first year, I might not remember this exactly right. I think the second year, at some point, I found out I was pregnant with Rachel, my third child. So I was like, okay, surely I'm going to quit now. And he's like, no, finish. So we got all the way through law school, thankfully. In law school, you don't really specialize. You just decide what kind of law you want to practice. So I was thinking family law. And I still had this like draw back to Alaska though. So May, I graduated in May, and then we all moved back to Alaska.
You did?
Yes, we did. And it was really clear at that point, like the restaurant was struggling, it needed to be sold. And so it was clear that I wasn't going to do that. So I studied for the Alaska bar, the Hawaii bar exam, and then took the Alaska bar. And before I even got the results, we had moved back to Nebraska because all of our connections were here, right? Like we were like everything, all my friends were here. So I finally, like, I think my dad's dream came true, and I had found like I'm going to settle here.
That highway again.
Oh my God. I didn't. I flew with the kids, but my husband was amazing. He drove that highway like.
Can I interrupt really?
Yeah, he's on.
This is Chris Hobbs. I'm Ann's husband, and I drove that highway 5 times in one summer. So it was.
I knew it was bad.
it was fun, and I will tell you this, that the last time I got off the highway, I wanted to get back on it again because it was just okay. I'm driving back and forth, and that's didn't need a map or anything like that. I knew my way, how to get to Alaska from here. So it was quite interesting and a lot of fun. So
I can't believe it was 5 times. That's crazy.
That is, but I would also say traveling on an airplane with 3 young children would be that's kind of crazy too. So.
Oh, this is just the start.
try 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say this looks like our same days actually.
Okay.
Like the calm days. So finished law school.
And one of the things that I have friends tell me is that it's really unusual to finish law school still an idealist. So I'm like, I really finished law school wanting to still, do something different for the world, right? Make the world look different. And you do, when you get done with any long training, you kind of get slotted towards something. So I started practicing family law here in Lincoln, opened up my own firm with another 2 people from law school, because still had that sense of I want to do my own business. I want to have my own hours. But I hated family law. I just really did. You meet people at the toughest time, right? It's not at a point where they're adopting children or something positive, something's dissolving or breaking. And so it was a tough time. So at the same time, I then started working for a nonprofit. I started working for Cedars in Lincoln and loved it, right? So I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done with my life? I've done all of this training for this one field, but I don't really enjoy it. So this was one of the times I think I had to really be brave. And I mean, shout out to my husband. There are times that people are like, you went to law school, why are you doing this, right? So having people around you that support those moments where you have to say yes to something that looks maybe counterintuitive, right, or risky, or and my goodness, he has been a solid partner in the department. He doesn't let me do totally crazy stuff, but pretty borderline. So at that time, I ended up just kind of letting the law firm. I gave my cases to the other 2 partners, and I walked away. And in hindsight, it ended up being the absolute best move of my life. So I started working with youth and really looking at how do we improve how we serve youth and keep them out of harmful situations. And I have to say that ended up really being the theme of my life so far. But I didn't know it then, right? At the time, sometimes when you make these jump off the bridge decisions, it looks like the world around you is like, why would you get a law degree and then work at a nonprofit, not even in a legal arena? So you're not even using your degree, is what people used to say to me. And so it feels like a lot of pressure to do what the world wants you to do, even though, like, for me, my soul was like, no, I know this is what I should be doing. And I'm sure, like, anybody who's opened their own business probably felt the same thing. Like, why would you walk away from something steady and do something risky? But the other thing I just really discovered at this time was if you listen to yourself and your own skills, which, again, anybody who opens their own business is like, hey, I'm good at this, is I started to notice I was really good with numbers. And that was something I had never seen, like, as a child or as a girl. Nobody had really said, like, look, you're really good at this. But as I was running a diversion program for Cedars, this was, I don't know, 20 years ago or so, I would notice patterns in things and notice, like, what kids are successful, which ones aren't, who shows up in court, who doesn't, right? And so I started really playing with numbers and was just phenomenally successful at it. So, for example, at that time, it was something like, I don't know, $200 to have to serve a kid in detention, and it was 52 cents a day. I remember it to this day because I presented to the Lancaster County Board, and they were like, that's phenomenal. And I was like, I think so too. So that kind of really love of numbers and having, when the numbers tell you a story, it's like speaking a different language, but to this day, it's like, I just love that. I love using data in that way. So I ended up starting my own business. My fourth child, let me put it that way, my fourth child had just been born, and I was really feeling like, hey, people notice I'm good at this. So I started Connecting Data Inc. and really got to do probably the most fun work of my life. It's similar to what I do now, but when you're employed by yourself, there's something really fun about that. I think you can do things on your own schedule. You don't have to, I don't know. That was just a wonderful window of time. And I got to really spend quality time with my fourth child. So I did this for, I think it was about 5 or 6 years that I ran Connecting Data. I did contracts with the county, a couple with the state, and a couple with the university. And again, they were all around, like, looking at patterns, racial patterns in our juvenile justice systems and what kind of juvenile systems work.
Is then in the juvenile arena then, Anne?
Yeah, I think all of them were. Yeah. So again, like, even without meaning to, you start to gravitate towards things because people notice you're good at them, and then they want to hire you for doing that. So I really started kind of building this portfolio. But the whole time, my people around me, the world around me was like, why don't you use your law degree? So I always felt like, oh, wow. So I ended up, when Ben was hitting kindergarten age, so the fourth child was about kindergarten age, I thought, yeah, maybe I should go back and practice law. So I always have this, like, problem, like, okay, which hat do I use? And I've had trouble sometimes integrating all of it, right? So I ended up applying for and running the Nebraska Equal Opportunity Commission for, again, about 5 or 6 years. I liked the work, but it was very political and very tough. So it's the agency that handles all the discrimination complaints in the state of Nebraska. So I learned a lot. I think it was really valuable work because the people come to you and they might be like, hey, I feel like I was discriminated at work. And then as you peel back the layers, you find out, like, maybe there was a legitimate reason or maybe there wasn't. So I like that kind of investigative work. And I worked with a team of about 40 people. So they did a lot of the investigation, and then I got to read the report. So that was awesome. But while that was happening, one of the patterns I would notice, so again, like, I really pay attention to patterns. And so I would notice sometimes investigators would come out of the intake room and they would say, oh, I don't think that person has a case, or I think that person has a case. And I'd be like, wait, we're just starting. So I became really intrigued by, how do you know if somebody has a case? Like, what is it about? Like, if you talk to me, Jody, is it your credibility? How are we connecting in this way? So I decided I would work part-time on a PhD. And people around me are like, work part-time on a PhD. And I was like, especially because at that time we had 4 kids and we were building a house. So I was like, well, like, I can spend time watching TV or take a class here and there. Like, really, like, so like anything though, like, once you start it, like, if you're really engaged and excited, and like with your own business, you just, like, the ball starts rolling and you're taking all the classes and you're like, let's write a dissertation, right? So at least with me, I find that when I'm passionate about something, it's harder to pull back than it is just to dive in and do it. So
Time then, or did you
no,
see it part-time?
part-time, yeah. So I was full-time employed by the state and doing this part-time and building a house part-time.
And raising some kids.
Yeah, and raising some kids. So again, I think sometimes we limit ourselves. Like it sounds really crazy when you say it like that, but no, when you actually are doing it, I think if you portion things out and are organized, like things are more doable than we give ourselves credit for, I think. So it took me, I think, 5 or 6 years. So I did it fairly slow and ended up getting a PhD in sociology and really looked at inequalities. So it started to bring together pieces of things that I love to do, looking at numbers, looking at patterns, inequality. And so I thought at that time, right as I was finishing my PhD, before I finished it, the university came to me and offered me the position I'm in now with juvenile justice. So I'll talk a little bit about that because it's what I do now. It's my passion. It does put all these pieces together. And we really are working to find how do we know if a juvenile justice program is effective or not? Like is there a secret element? Like in Nebraska, there's about 250 different programs that serve youth. I'm not talking about detention centers or those things. I'm talking about like a diversion program or a mentoring program or a mental health program. And so sometimes we see certain programs are really good at keeping kids, like building some kind of connection and keeping them out of the juvenile justice system and eventually the adult system. And then some programs just, it doesn't connect, it doesn't take. So that's really what we study now. When we started this, and I say we, first it was me alone in an office, right? And then it grows and then it gains steam. And so when, I don't know, we were a couple of years into this thinking of like, how do you figure this out, right? How do you figure out what the element is, especially when you're looking at about 250 programs statewide. And so our partner is a state agency, and how it works in Nebraska is programs are given, or counties are given a certain amount of money, and they spend that on youth. And so we had to devise an electronic system to capture data across the state and to measure that. And I actually, just a podcast dropped a couple days ago that I can send you the link if you want, if you're interested in this. But it was a really big endeavor. We had to work with IT partners, and then we had to get all the, like, probably about 1,000 people to read all the different definitions, right? Like, what do you mean by success? What do I mean by success? So it was a huge endeavor. And then the other thing is we think it's the only one, we're the only state in the nation right now that is doing this. Like, they have other centers that, like, you have a center that somebody can call in and say, what's evidence-based practice for a diversion program? So there's centers where you can get information, and there's centers where you can do an individual program evaluation. But we don't know of another state that's kind of uniformly measuring 240 programs. And so when we started, people were like, well, that can't be done. And to me, those are like magic words. I'm like, really? Let's go. I love that. So it's kind of back to like, even like when you're a kid and my dad was like, well, like there's something about that that's just excites me when somebody's like, I don't think this can be done. I'm like, ooh, let's go. So, am I doing okay on time?
Yes.
Okay. So I mentioned there's about 224 different programs that we're currently studying. These might be last year's numbers. And so we look at things like it could be a direct care event, or it could be some kind of direct intervention. And so that means, like, am I a program I meet directly with youth? I coach them on something. So we measure things like how much time do you spend with the youth, and other factors like do demographics matter? Like, are you more successful with white male youth? Or so we try to really take into all the variables that can make somebody successful in a program or a business. Like, how do you connect with people, and how does it come out successful in the end is really the big question. Still intrigues me, which you'll hear about in a minute. But if you're interested, we have a bunch of these reports out on our website.
Because that was going to be my question, like what has your group come up with? Or is it just situational? I'm sure there's not you can't just lay something out in front of a nonprofit and say, if you do all of these things, everything will work perfect, right?
Right. So that's the trick, right? Is that's where we're trying to get is, are there some overarching things that do make programs successful? And that question will take us to Singapore. Like that is like, I'm really dedicated to finding that answer to that, which sounds like it's hard to answer because, right, like individual factors happen in individual programs. And so we've gone this path of like answering this question. We've looked at big scale, measuring 240 programs. Last year, we looked at 2 programs up close, right? So it's not, we don't know the answer to it is the short. But
So
yeah, searching for it is like, I think the fun part. So yeah. Yeah, please ask questions. So I have to tell you though, during all of this, because I very rarely just do one thing at one time, I really try to, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be really calm and organized and focused and do one thing, right? So during the same time, while all of this work was kicking up, my husband and I, our 4th child was the last one at home, and things were calming down, but he was real lonely. Like we live on an acreage, and so we're like, oh, he's kind of sad. He's like 12, and I have this picture of he's walking around with his wagon by himself, and I'm like, oh, how sad. Like, and we didn't have a lot of kids in the neighborhood at that time. And neighborhood, I mean, like, I don't know, it's probably 25 acres, right? There's houses out there, but not. So we decided we have like a bigger house and bigger car, and we thought, why don't we do foster care for a while? Because while I was at Cedars, that kind of had sparked, like something had sparked in my soul, and I thought, someday maybe we should do this. So we started fostering about maybe 2012, and when you sign up for foster care, you we went through an agency, so we went through Christian Heritage, and you sign up, you can give parameters of like kids you think you work well with. And we had said something like no infants. And the other thing was we were really not very interested in adopting because we had raised 4 kids and we just wanted to help out temporarily and really get kids back to their parents because kids need their parents, right? So we started really logically and calm, like all things do, right? We had a fun little girl. We got a little puppy. We were like, this is so cool. We went through the training in April and didn't even get a placement till November. So we're like, nice and slow. This is so cool. This is not how I do anything. So I thought, I'm turning over a new leaf, right? And then by the end of November, they were like, remember when you signed up, you really said you want to keep siblings together, which is absolutely true. We wanted to keep bigger sibling groups together instead of having them split up into different homes. And so they're like, we have 4 kiddos we really need to keep together. So by the end of that November in 2012, we had 5 kids. The new puppy was eating everything in the house. Like we were like, oh my God, we've made a big mistake. So we stepped back and we put everybody in respite care, and we got in our car and went to the mountains, and we're like, can we do this? Like, I think there's times you do have to stop when you've taken a big jump and you're like, okay, can we do this? Like, what do we do? What would we get rid of? How would we do this? You know? And it turned out we just needed some of the logistics. Like, you know, like if you've ever been in the position where you start a new business and it's in your basement, you got papers all over, and then you get a space like this, and you're like, oh, I just needed to have space. So we just got a bigger car because when we had all those kids, we were driving twice every place. And so we just needed a bigger car. We got the dog some training, so we stopped eating everything. And so things kind of settled down. But that started, alongside the work path, it started, we've fostered now about 25 kids. Yeah. So while everything is very busy at work, everything is very busy at home. And one of the reasons it's so many kids, we tend to keep sibling groups together, was really, after that one first little girl, it was really more groups of 4 kids usually. So it sounds like kids were running in and out of our house, but it was really every year we'd have about 4 or 5 kiddos stay with us. Yeah. So it's not as wild as it sounds, but it was a little wild. So while we were doing that, we really had made this vision of slowing down, though, because, I think you do have to pay attention to yourself and be like, okay, sometimes running a marathon every day is a bad idea, right?
They'll eventually catch up to you.
Right. So we were having those discussions, and we had a couple of kind of really rowdy groups of foster kids in our house, like some kids on probation, even though originally it had been like, no, 12 and younger. I don't know, the system kind of talks you into stuff. And we'd had a couple of 18-year-olds, and we had a couple of kids on probation. And by the next picture is, so we had we had decided that the day after our fourth kid graduated from high school that we were going to get a little condo downtown and really start traveling and really slow down, just work and travel, kind of just focus on us. And so I know this is a picture of the Daily Double, which is like our big restaurant in Denton. Woohoo! Lots of people know it for some reason. Lots of people have been there. But one night, it was Memorial Day 2016. We were in this restaurant and we were like, we are done. We are so done. I don't remember the circumstances or what had happened, but we very rarely would go have a drink if we had foster kids in the house. And this night we had a foster kid out skateboarding through Denton and we were like, we're having a drink and we're done. We're done. And he was transitioning to his aunt's house. And so it was a good time. We were like, we're really moving on now. And Ben, I think, was a year or two out. So we were making plans to remodel our house and to be kind of these people who colored more within the lines, like just normal people, right? So about 4 or 5 days after we were sitting here making these great plans, so the state called and said, we have 4 kids we'd really like to place with you. And we're like, this is our last placement. This is the last time. We're done. And they're like, okay, we totally honor that. We're done. And I don't know how many of you are spiritual, but I really think God was laughing his head off because we were done, but you'll hear why in a minute. So that's when there's 5 on the screen, you'll notice, but the little cutie at the far end wasn't born yet. So 4 of these kiddos came to us and were like, this will be short term. This will be good. And, I like the idea of intentionally walking into something and having it be like a final chapter. There was something like, okay, we're planning finally, like thinking through things before we do them. So months went on and we would go to court and things weren't really progressing the way they could have been. And then about November, we found out there was a baby coming. And I was just celebrating my 50th year. And I was like, I don't think I can do a baby at 50. So originally I was like, this was one of my harder yeses I'll just frame it that way. I was like, I don't know if I can do sleepless nights. I don't know what this looks like. But in the foster care system, if you don't keep groups together, they really end up on different paths. And so we're like, that is our mission and vision from the beginning was always keeping kids together. So we're like, we're going to do this. So, like everything, the thing I was most afraid of ended up being my favorite thing. I loved getting up in the middle of the night. It was the quietest time. It was the calmest time. Yeah. Yes. Ended up like, it was just beautiful. It was probably one of my happiest times, I think, of just spending time quiet in the middle of the night. So ends up that they all come to live with us. And things didn't progress like they should have if kids are going to go back to their parents. So I don't remember the exact month, but at one point the system comes to us and they asked if we would adopt. And we're like, but we're moving into a little condo and we're traveling. But really, we'd totally fallen in love. And, we couldn't say no. We just couldn't say no. And I wouldn't say no if I had to do it all over again. But again, it's a time in your life where you have to say yes or no. And I think we had friends who were like, this is not a good time to say yes, Anne. And I was like, I think it's the right time. Like, again, I feel like so many times I have to struggle with my soul says yes, but the world is like, this is not going to be healthy to make this choice. But we adopted in 2018. And ironically, this is Judge Porter at the end. When we went to get on the court docket, we were asking for a June date because we wanted to have a big party out in Denton, right? And they said, no. There was some scheduling conflict. She was out of town or on vacation. She's like, we have to put it on this day. And it was Monday. I don't remember the exact date, but it was right after my son's graduation on Sunday. Oh. So I was like, oh my gosh, what are the odds of that? So my husband jokes, he's like, yeah, we were empty nesters for 12 hours. Woohoo! So yes, we now have a family of 9 children, and 5 of them live at home. So yeah. So we had made a promise, though, to ourselves that we would still travel and we would still live our lives, right? Like, I think sometimes people are like, I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to totally stop doing everything. And first of all, I don't think I've ever done that, right? I did law school and all that, but also I think sometimes then you can eventually resent when you make some of those choices. So, I mean, the trade-off is then you've got a lot on your plate, right? So, at some point after or during the adoption or something, I had gotten a call to present in Malacca, Malaysia. And when the call first came in, it came through a nonprofit agency in Nebraska. It's the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association, NJJA, and people were like, no, that's not a real request. And I was like, why not? Like, let's Google them, right? They had like 11 years of conference presentations. So I was like, let's do this. And people were like, no. But I found one partner who would go with me. And I was like, let's do this. And again, my awesome spouse was like, okay, I'll watch the kids and you can go do this presentation. So this is an example, I think, of when you say yes to things. Like, first of all, it was keeping our commitment to continuing to explore the world, even though we had a house full of kids. And then how do you pair these things, right? How do you make it manageable? So I think it was like a week-long presentation, and it's really cool if any of you ever want to Google it. It's in partnership with the United Nations, and they take certain topics every year. So it's not that year. It was juvenile justice, which is why it was my area. But sometimes it's environmental. So it's around the sustainable goals of the United Nations. So sometimes it's women's rights. Sometimes it's infrastructure. Sometimes it's so what they do is they bring in guest speakers, and then they bring together youth from all over the world who create a document, and then that document goes to the UN. So it's a really, really, really like absolutely love that I said yes. But when my friend and I were getting on the plane, we were both like, oh, what if this is a total scam? Like what have we done? Like you're at that moment where you're like in the panic, like, why have I said yes? What am I doing? And she'll laugh when she hears this because that's exactly, we were both like, we're in Omaha still. We could just like not go. Like we just lost the price of the ticket. Like we're both negotiating, like, should we do this? But when we did that, we actually, that's a really crazy story that will take too long. But we met an individual from Singapore who helped us write the draft of the declaration. And so the three of us ended up working really closely together, which then ended up, so that was in Malaysia. That's like the downtown area. It's a really cute little place. But then we ended up being invited to Singapore like the next year to come and present on restorative practices and kind of what's effective in programs that work or even businesses that work. What's the effective ingredient? So by saying yes to Malaysia, we ended up in Singapore. And so by this time, the kids, they had fully adopted, because sometimes when you're in foster care, it's hard to leave the country. It's hard to even travel. You have to get parental permission and DHHS permission, and you don't have passports and those things. So by this time, this was 2018, we had adopted and everybody had their passport. And so we're like, we haven't done a big trip with the kids. So let's do this. So their first airplane experience was a 16-hour flight. Actually, I think we had to fly to LA first. But their first time on an airplane was a big one. It was 16 hours, I think, to Singapore from San Francisco. So we took them all to Singapore. And am I okay on time? Because there's something
Yeah.
Is it okay?
We want to leave a little bit of time for.
Yeah. I'll tell this fast, but when we made the plans to go, I, of course, had not done all of the research yet. I just was like, I got an invitation. I'm saying yes, right? So my kids, it was summertime, and I was like, we bought the tickets. I'm like, do some research. Like, spend your summer afternoon looking up Singapore. So I come home from work that day, and they're like, yeah, Mom, it is illegal to chew gum in Singapore. And it is, if you don't flush a toilet in a public area, that's illegal. Singing loudly is illegal.
That's so funny that's what they picked up on, but
Yes.
that's reflective of
Yes.
ages at that time, right?
Yes, they were intrigued by all the things we couldn't do. And I was terrified because I'm like, you guys do all of those things. Like, literally, then when Chris came home, I was like, oh no, like, you're going to be stuck in the hotel room the whole time I'm at this conference. How do we cancel these? Like, I'm in full blown, like, pull out of this, yes, right? And he's like, I got this. So it ended up, Singapore's an amazing place for kids. Amazing, extremely safe, really receptive to kids. these things are illegal, but I think it's mostly for adults. Like, still people don't do it. Like, you train your kids not to do those things, which we're trying. But so it was really an amazing experience for all of us. And while I was at the conference, I ended up having a conversation with someone, and I was talking about the equity of their system and how it's really like a really beautiful society, and there's a lot of things that are going right. And he was like, yeah, you should come back and study here, because for certain groups of people, that's not true. So it went back to kind of my interest in inequalities. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. He's like, if you want to come back, let me know. So that, to me, I hear yes. So I did. His name is Professor, we call him Professor Ghana because I can't pronounce his last name. But that resulted in, I've done a Fulbright now to Singapore. So Fulbright, for those of you who are aware, it's a grant through, oh my gosh, it's escaping me. It's a national entity, the State Department. And the mission is really to foster mutual understanding between countries. So you can go in a lot of different capacities, like as an educator, as a teacher, as a professional. So it's just a phenomenal opportunity that if I Google it, look it up, there's probably a spot for you, and all sorts of different countries. So I went specifically to study the inequalities because I was seeing just the rosy side of things. And I've now been back twice to continue studying. So the one summer, my kids came with me because, again, they're like, well, how do we juggle 5 kids and I want to be in Singapore for 2 months? So my husband came for a while, and the kids lived with me for, we spent 2 months there, and the kids were there. It was summertime, so they got an awesome opportunity to hang out in Singapore, and it's extremely safe. Like, it's one of the few countries you could tell your kids, go explore, wander down the street, take the metro somewhere. So it's really a great environment, because there aren't a lot of places in the world where I would feel comfortable doing that. Like, yes, on the acreage, and yes to Singapore. Interesting, 2 totally different environments, right? So we've really tried to keep this commitment of, like, kind of our own passions in life and our own promises to ourselves and our own entrepreneurial interests, right, of starting a business or continuing our work, while having this personal commitment too, right? So the kids are now 6 is the youngest, so she's not a baby anymore, and the oldest is 15. I almost brought him today, but he wanted to go to the library. Silly him. So I'll kind of just wrap it up with, like, I think all of us have this vocation in life, right? And a lot of times we don't let that shape we don't really let it go. We don't fully become who we're meant to be because we're cautious, right? We're like, oh, this is risky or this is dangerous. But I've really noticed that when I say yes to things, as long as, and that's the next stream, like, if you have people around you who will kind of keep you on the rails and be honest with you, right? Like, I have a really awesome family unit. Even my grown daughters now will be like, wow, that's risky, Mom. And then I know, ooh, okay, maybe we shouldn't build a new house or whatever it is I'm thinking, right? So as long as you have people around you that'll help shape that, I think I really encourage people to be more open to saying yes. Because in my life, it's connected so many wonderful opportunities that, and I think things don't happen by chance. Like, I think even being up here today, I'm like, oh, look at all these awesome people and businesses. I'm like, I'm going to get to know all of you. So I just love the opportunities of life, you know. And I think I was just kind of to go back to childhood like that. I remember when we used to have newspapers, I would read the want ads. I'd read the opportunities ads, right? So I just oh yeah, I love that. To this day, if somebody handed me the newspaper, I would be like, let's see what's out there, you know? So I think that's just part of who I am. So, yep, that's, like I said, my watch broke this morning, so hopefully I haven't rambled too long, but.
Thank you so much for telling your story. Do we have any questions? I want to know the cookie thing.
Oh my God, it was really bad. So this is dumb, but we you know, when we had like a salad bar and you have to do those crumbled up eggs, and I am a person who I love efficiency, so I put them in the microwave with the shell on, and they didn't explode in the microwave. I don't know why to this day, but my dad went to chop them, and when they touched it, it blew up, and he had burn marks on his face. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't serious, but it was definitely, they're like, you don't belong in the kitchen, just spotting your talent. So to this day, my husband is much more the guy in the kitchen. Like, yeah, isn't that funny?
To this day, she is not allowed to cook in the kitchen.
Oh, I'm allowed, but yes, yeah. Isn't that funny? I'll never forget that. But
What not to do. This is children. This is what not to do.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I do. I don't have them memorized, but we did them internally. And how I know one of them is futuristic. I'm thinking my top 5 because I did the whole like 30, so I could see the bottom too. Oh my gosh, I have to go back and pull them out.
I'm gonna guess that achiever is one of them, maybe.
Yeah, I think it is.
Learner.
Absolutely. Yep, that's number 1 or 2. Yeah, I have to go put. Yeah. Yeah, I love those because when I looked at them, I was like, oh, this really lines up. So, but learner, I think, is 1 or 2. That's my top.
I would definitely say that's got to be one of your top ones. And Ray and I joke about learner. We tease Ray about her spreadsheets too. But just to looking at your strengths, like you said throughout, like
Down.
you go with what your strengths are, you go with what your talents are, and it leads you to some really wonderful
Yeah.
places.
And things that the world didn't tell me, right? Like the numbers thing really to this day surprised me because I was like, I love this numbers. It's like its own language, right? And people now tell me, because once you find it and you start doing it, then people are like, wow, you're good at this. Or so I still have people tell me like, oh, can you come talk about this or present on this? Because I like taking numbers and making them the story. Or it shows a picture, really. So
Data driven, which then can drive home your point, right?
Right.
Makes your story even have more validity and it's
yeah.
I love how it's perfect for the entrepreneurial world because a lot of times we'll start something and everyone around us say, no, don't do that. You should write that. But we proved it wrong.
Right.
It becomes something really, really beautiful. So thank you for listening. Well, and Jamie Kern Lima, who is her story. Okay. And it's too long for this. But everyone told her, no, do this. She trusts her gut.
Oh, I'd love it. I gotta Google her or find her. Yes.
But her big advice is trust your gut.
Yes.
No matter what everyone else is telling me, trust your gut.
Yeah. That is absolutely something I've said to myself over the years because so much of what I've done, people really were actively saying, don't do this. No, this doesn't look right. Because it's just not in the traditional path, right? And it's unconventional. And so I think people get uncomfortable when it's not like, I would love to hear that story. Oh, nice.
I don't really have a question, but just a comment and a thank you. Hearing your story and your work and with juveniles.
Oh, good. I love when people are passionate and emotional about their work.
And I also run a venue called Brokerage Events, and a lot of most of my energy goes into that. Maintaining that business. We do weddings.
Oh, cool.
And weddings support my ability to do the artistic work with the funnels, and I'm talking about their soul. As much as I enjoy, meeting couples and families and creating, this wonderful event for them, my soul is back to work right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And wanting to do more.
Yeah.
So, the Pathfinder program has been great. And we have, created a wonderful program. And last year, Dirk Baker, my teacher out at LPS, we presented at a symposium in Kentucky. Last year, we've been invited back to present again in Chicago. And, so I'm at this point of, centering and going inward and finding how I can grow that.
Yeah.
And using my venue to create bridges perhaps because one of the things that we don't have is a bridge from, what we do out at the, with our art program out at the center, we make breakthroughs or we make connections with kids, and then it goes nowhere.
Yeah.
They go off to whatever, maybe they go back to their families, maybe they go back to a facility. But anyway, so, so it's been.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I would love to talk to you more. We have mentors that we place in detention facilities that it's basically training undergraduate students so they're matched to youth in detention centers. And I mean, it's a program that started kind of by accident, and it's now in like its 10th year, and probation and other people just call us and say, hey, do you have a mentor for this youth? Because it's one of those things that when the elements are right, and it allows for that long-term relationship. Because so many of our detention facilities, like once a youth leaves, you can't maintain contact. It's like part of the policy. So it maintains ongoing relationships. So I would love to talk to you more about juveniles, because that is absolutely my passion of figuring out, like, what is it that makes programs work and successful. So, and when I say programs, I think it could be an art program, it could be a mentoring program, or it could be a therapist's relationship with a youth, right? So we all know, like, sometimes things really work, and they work because the kid connects and they want to make changes, or it totally doesn't work. And sometimes that's harmful when it doesn't work. So, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, Brooke. Ooh, yeah. Really, it's bringing what I learned in Singapore back here in some way. And so Singapore is an interesting story because they have really some harsh laws on the books, but they've been able to really integrate the relationship piece with adult prisoners, with kids in many of their agencies, and it's a game changer. So the data tells us, like, in the States, somewhere about, I think it's about 85% of people who are in prison will recycle back right into prison within a year. So Singapore's dropped that to about 27%. So lots of variables, right? Could be the type of crimes, it could be the facilities, it could be a lot of things. But one of the pieces, there's a book called Trash of Society, and it kind of tells the story of this, but it's about how we treat people when they re-enter society. Or, how do we treat a kid who's in a detention facility? Do we think, good for you, you're getting punished? Or do we think something about your story led you on this path, and how can I come alongside you and help you so you can have a healthy life, right? So that piece, Singapore has done a surprising job of this. And I'm so passionate about this. I'm working with the university to bring a group of students and professionals back. Because it's one of those things, it's like the concepts are too big for me to convey, and it feels too far away. But when you see it, you're like, oh, we could do this, because it's about having a meaningful relationship. That's it. So there's something so simple about it. But to see a whole country be able to turn a criminal justice system around, I mean, it's taken them like 30 years. So it's not like an overnight thing, but that is definitely my next, like, getting those elements into our juvenile justice system here in Nebraska is, like, the specific way is really around restorative practices or restorative justice. If any of you have heard those terms, that is kind of the pathway that I'll use to do that. But there's a little bit of resistance to that sometimes, because people think it's easy on crime, but it's not. So that's a whole different, I would love to talk to you about just restorative practices, because that's my mission. Yeah, that's my next mission. So.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, and
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your
Oh,
story.
you're very
It's
welcome.
Very moving, I love to hear it. So,
Thanks.
We love to have Ray here. So I'm glad that our connection with Ray brought you here. So,
Thank you.
We want to give Anne a round of applause.
Thanks. All right.
And just to remind everybody, we are going on vacation, so there will be no perk ups in July. We will start off again in August. Don't remember the first Thursday in August, whatever that date will be.